The sun hung low over the dusty plains, painting the horizon in streaks of amber and crimson. A thin wind rattled the wooden signs of the small ranching town of Dry Creek, carrying with it the faint scent of sagebrush and smoke. The town itself was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt fragile, like the world was holding its breath before a storm. On the outskirts, a lone cowboy guided his horse along the well-worn trail, dust curling around the animal's hooves with each deliberate step. His name was Jace McCall, known among ranchers and travelers, alike for his steady hand and a temper that rarely flared, though when it did, men made a point of remembering it. Today, though, there was a tension in his jaw, a sense that something was off. Perhaps it was the rumors he'd heard in town. A woman had been seen near the edge of the cliffs, vanishing as mysteriously as she appeared. Or maybe it was simply a quiet that always preceded trouble. Jace's horse, a chestnut mare named Red, snorted and pawed the ground. He gave her a gentle nudge with his heel, urging her onward, but even she seemed uneasy. The trail wound through narrow canyons and over small ridges, each turn revealing vistas of jagged rocks and dry riverbeds. The sun had dipped low enough to cast long shadows, stretching like fingers across the sand, and for a moment, Jace thought he saw movement, a flash of white, near a hidden waterfall. Curiosity pulled him closer. Waterfalls were rare in these parts, tucked away behind sheer rock faces where only the bold or the desperate would venture. And as he rounded the last bend, he found himself staring at a secret, shimmering cascade. The water fell with a hypnotic grace, sending mist into the air that caught the fading sunlight. And there she was, an Apache woman, half hidden behind the veil of spray, eyes wide with fear, her hands pressed against her chest as if guarding herself from the world.
"Cowboy."
"Don't look, my dress is gone," she whispered, voice trembling but defiant. Jace's heart stuttered. She was a vision he could scarcely believe, standing there as if conjured from the myths his mother had told him as a boy. Her long hair clung to her damp shoulders, and the fear in her eyes was matched only by the fierce fire of survival. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching in the dust, keeping his gaze level but respectful. "Easy now," he said softly. "I won't do anything you don't want me to." She flinched at the sound of his voice but didn't run. There was something in her posture, pride, pain, a story unspoken that demanded his attention. You shouldn't be here," she said, voice barely audible above the roar of the waterfall. "I could say the same," he replied, glancing around the canyon. "I don't see anyone else either." A tense silence followed, filled only by the thrum of water against stone and the distant cry of a hawk. Jace felt the weight of the moment. A life could hinge on a single decision, and he wasn't the kind to let fear dictate his actions. "Name's Jace," he said finally. "I can help, just tell me how." She studied him, eyes narrowing. Then after a pause, she gave a slight nod. Trust wasn't offered lightly, not out here. And as the sun sank below the horizon, casting the canyon in shades of violet and gold, he realized that this encounter would change the course of both their lives. But they weren't alone. Shadows moved along the cliffs, men with malicious intent, following trails, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jace noticed the glint of steel in the fading light and tensed. Whoever these men were, they weren't going to leave quietly. And if he wanted the woman behind the waterfall to survive the night, he'd have to act fast. He guided her away from the edge, keeping both of them in the dim shelter of the rocks. "We need to move," he said quietly. "Follow me and stay low." As they crept through the canyon, the tension between them was palpable, not fear, not yet, but a recognition that danger was closer than either wanted to admit. And beneath it all, a spark flickered, a connection neither could name, a pull forged in shared peril. The first chapter closes with the canyon shadows deepening, the whispers of the waterfall fading behind them, and the distant sound of approaching riders growing louder. Jace tightened his grip on the reins, his mind racing with the moral dilemma of whether to fight or flee, protect or hide. The woman beside him caught his sleeve, a silent plea, and he knew there was no turning back. Night had fallen over the canyon, draping it in a heavy, suffocating darkness that swallowed every sound, except the occasional whisper of wind and the soft rush of the hidden waterfall behind them. Jace led the Apache woman, Ilara, as she finally whispered her name, along a narrow ledge, keeping to the shadows. Every creak of the rocks underfoot, every rustle of sagebrush made them both flinch, hearts hammering in unison. The danger from the men trailing them was real, and it was close. Ilara's bare shoulders were cold under the night air, and Jace offered her his coat, brushing off his own sweat from the exertion of their escape. "Keep it on," he murmured, "not just for warmth, but as a shield." She hesitated, the fire of independence in her eyes, refusing to bow to courtesy. But the subtle tremor in her hands betrayed her relief as she accepted it. The canyon twisted and turned, a labyrinth of jagged rocks and hidden crevices. Somewhere above, the moon peeked between cliffs, casting silvery slivers of light across the dusty trail. Jace's mind raced, calculating every step, every crevice they could use to evade the men hunting them. These weren't simple bandits, they were experienced trackers, armed and patient. They had been waiting for an opportunity, and Jace was determined not to give them one. As they paused near a shallow cave, Ilara pressed herself against the wall. Her eyes, reflecting the pale moonlight, were wide and alert. "Stay close," she whispered. "I can feel it." Jace nodded. "We'll wait here until they pass. Then we move." His voice was low, steady, trying to inject calm where there was none. Yet even he couldn't shake the gnawing tension building in his chest. This was more than a chase. It was a test of will, of instinct, of every choice they'd make in the coming hours. The men's distant voices reached them eventually, muffled by the canyon walls but unmistakable. They argued quietly, unaware of the two figures crouched just meters away. Jace's hand went to the revolver at his hip, but he didn't draw it, not yet. Violence wasn't the answer he wanted, not if it could be avoided. Still, he prepared for the worst. Hours passed in near silence, punctuated by the occasional splash of water from the hidden waterfall. Slowly, Jace realized something he hadn't expected. The bond between him and Ilara was deepening. It wasn't just survival, it was trust. Fragile and tentative, born in the crucible of danger. Her hand brushed against his, almost accidentally, and he felt an electric jolt that neither of them could name. It was a connection that went beyond words, beyond reason, and he knew it would shape the choices they'd make next. Eventually the voices faded, and Jace guided Ilara further along the canyon trail, careful to avoid leaving footprints in the soft dirt. Every sense was alert, the smell of the canyon, the shift in the wind, the faint sound of hooves far above. Somewhere in the shadows, the men were still hunting, but their advantage had narrowed. Jace's plan was simple: reach the open plains at first light, where they could blend with the morning dust and vanish before the hunters knew what had happened. But danger has a way of finding the unsuspecting. A hidden ravine blocked their path, forcing them to climb a treacherous incline. Loose stones shifted underfoot, sending tiny avalanches down the slope. Ilara froze, panic rising, and Jace tightened his grip on her arm. "I've got you," he said, voice firm but gentle. One step at a time. The climb was grueling, each movement fraught with the possibility of disaster. Yet with patience and a steady hand, they reached a high ledge overlooking the plains below. The wind carried the scent of freedom, of open land stretching endlessly under the rising sun. And in that moment, exhaustion and relief mingled with something else, a quiet, unspoken intimacy that neither dared to name aloud. Below, the plains shimmered in the dawn light. Jace helped Ilara mount a small, stray horse he'd found grazing near the edge of the canyon. As they rode side by side, dust rising around their hooves, the sense of danger never fully left, but it was tempered now by hope, by the knowledge that they had survived together. Yet the antagonists were not finished. On the distant horizon, a group of riders appeared, their silhouettes sharp against the morning sun. Jace felt a pang of dread. These men had resources, skill, and no moral restraint. But he also felt a surge of determination. He would not let them claim Ilara, not now, not ever. The chapter closes with Jace and Ilara galloping across the open plains, the wind whipping through their hair, the distant threat growing closer. and the promise of freedom and danger intertwined. Every heartbeat echoed the stakes of survival, of trust, of a connection neither could fully understand, yet neither could deny. Call to action if you want to see whether Jace can outsmart the hunters and what fate awaits him and Alara on the open plains. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow the thrilling conclusion.